Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to formally welcome you guys to Godzilla Fest. I got my Godzilla shirt on and everything. I'm ready to talk about these first 15 films in the Godzilla franchise, which is also known as the Showa era. And that ran from 1954 to 1975. Um, the Godzilla franchise has always been one of my favorite things when it comes to films since I was a kid. I was introduced to the Godzilla franchise very early on, probably around maybe five years old or something. I think my dad or my brother or somebody was watching them on TV, and I was just kind of intrigued by what I was seeing on TV, and just that's just kind of where my love grew for those films from that point on. So and then that kind of like developed even more as there was a lot of stuff that was inspired by the Godzilla franchise that I end up loving as well, like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. All that stuff came out like 92, 93, and a lot of their like the Megazords fighting, Rita's different monsters, were all like heavily inspired by the Godzilla films and the Toho films, and same thing with like Ultraman and Common Rider, and a lot of that stuff was just all came was all influenced by the Godzilla franchise, and before I get into the movies I'm going to be talking about tonight, guys, I just wanted to go ahead and just put something out there as far as like my format for the way I do these reviews. Um, so, and okay, I also want to mention this. It would be for tonight's video. This would be in the 500 movies in 2025. This will be number 130 through 134. But as far as my format goes, I wanted to change something up a little bit. So normally, what I've been doing in the past, as I'll give a little introduction to the movie, I will talk about the filmmakers of the movie. I will talk about the story, and then I'll go into like the cast and most memorable moments. So what I'm doing with these, and I may go back to this format, but as far where I'm doing so many Godzilla films over the next 3 days, and that's right, guys. I forgot to mention that at the top of the video when I welcomed you to Godzilla Fest. This is just day one. So I'll also have day two and day three coming up this weekend as well. But like I was saying, where I have so many of these I'm gonna be doing this weekend, I wanted to kind of like condense it a little bit. So I'm not going to be going over like the whole cast of characters or memorable moments or anything. I'm just going to basically be just kind of giving an introduction and talk about the movie and just kind of talk about the legacy of each film in conclusion of it all. Um, but again, before I start as well, I just want to thank you guys for checking this video out. Hopefully, you will check out the other videos we'll be doing this weekend as well for Godzilla Fest. So yeah, just thank you guys very much for at least being here to check this out. So without further ado, I guess I will go ahead and jump in to the first film of the Godzilla franchise. I almost butchered that. Um, which is the one that started it all. I mean, this is just the one that pioneered everything in the whole kaiju um, film genre. And as a lifelong fan of Godzilla, as you could tell, um, the king of the monsters, Godzilla, I can confidently say that the original 1954 film, which is often simply titled Godzilla or Gojira in Japanese, and isn't just a monster movie to me. It's really it's a cultural touchstone, and it's a very genuinely thrilling cinematic experience that really continues to resonate, decades later, and has influenced so many franchises and films and TV shows. And for anyone that doesn't know a whole lot about Godzilla and is kind of vaguely curious about this behemoth that has stomped his way into our collective imaginations, this film is not just essential viewing, it is the bedrock. It is the foundation upon which the entire kaiju genre is built. Um, and let's go ahead and jump into that as why this black and white masterpiece is so powerful and enduring. Um, so, what is Godzilla exactly? So, in the 1954 Godzilla, the title character is, crafted to be more than just this giant lizard. He's a walking, breathing embodiment of just nuclear terror, and he's depicted as this kind of colossal dinosaur-like creature, who's easily towering over buildings at like a staggering 160 feet tall. I think is what they said, and his skin is all rough and scarred, and it's just this kind of visual cue that hints at like this trauma that's been inflicted upon him, and his eyes, while they're kind of minimal, in design, they're very piercing and just kind of convey this sense of like ancient power, and this barely contained rage. Um, so but it's not just his physical appearance. It's his atomic breath that really also truly defines Godzilla in this film. And this isn't just fire. It's a searing, white hot radioactive blast that just obliterates everything in its path. And it's visualized as this kind of destructive force of nature, which is capable of instantly just reducing steel and concrete just to ash. And this breath is not just like a really cool, monster ability. It's just kind of it's a direct metaphor for just all this the atomic bombs like destructive power, which is what this movie was kind of built around. And when Godzilla he unleashes like his breath on Tokyo, or anywhere he is in his surroundings, it's not just a city being destroyed. It's this nation that is reliving these horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and if you want to look more into that, to like the origins of Godzilla, it's that all that information is definitely out there for you guys to find. But I won't be going over everything because that would I could do a whole stream just over the original Godzilla from 1954. But anyway, beyond the whole physical aspect of Godzilla, it's he's presented as this kind of force of nature, just a consequence of like humanity's pride, and he's not exactly evil, I guess, but just kind of rather um this like ancient creature, who's been awakened and mutated by all this this atomic destruction, um, and he's in a way he's a very tragic figure, because he's more of a victim. I've always felt in a way who was just kind of thrust into this world that he doesn't belong to, and he's just reacting with all these primal instincts and to these sort of perceived threats, I guess. Um, and there's a this complexity to the character really sets that the 1954 Godzilla film apart from the rest of the franchise, and it makes the character so much more compelling than just this rampaging beast. Um, but I said I wouldn't talk about it much, but I got to go into it at least a little bit. So, with the origins of this film, so the origins of Godzilla in the 1954 film are kind of, I don't know, they're kind of like interwoven with these kind of socio political like landscape, I guess, of like of the post war Japan. Um, and this film, it was a direct response to the lingering like trauma of the atomic bombings and the growing anxieties that kind of surrounded nuclear weapons that were being tested out in the Pacific. Um, and the story explicitly states that Godzilla has been awakened and mutated by the hydrogen bomb testing. Um, and I don't think this is really just a subtle thing. It's really it's a direct like commentary, I guess, on the whole real world nuclear tests that are conducted by the United States in the Pacific, and just particularly the what was it called? I think it was the Castle Bravo test in 1954, which irradiated just the Japanese fishing boats and its crew, and just this real life incident, which is caused a lot of international outrage and just renewed fears of radiation and all that radiation poisoning in Japan. It just it was heavily influenced on the film's story. Um, and just the very name Godzilla is believed to be this kind of symbol of like of a gorilla, and a Kujira, which is in Japan is a whale. And this kind of hints at his size and his power, but kind of also carrying this subtle undertone of just something monstrous, and um, just this unnatural being from the depths, um, you know, both literally like the ocean and just metaphorically, like the depths of human fear and just technological advancement and all that. Um, so to get into the film now, the film's opening scenes, with the destroyed ships and the Odo Islands waters, and just immediately establishes this connection to the sea and just the unseen terror that's kind of lurking beneath. Um, and all the villagers that live there, their fear and just the elders that live there in the village, and all their kind of stories of this ancient monster being awakened as this primal and like kind of mythological, creature that it taps into this whole deep seated, I guess, cultural anxiety about unseen forces and just stuff like that. Um, so Godzilla is therefore not just a monster's origin, but it's kind of the origin of this national trauma that was projected onto you know the big screen, just allowing audiences to kind of collectively confront that and just process their fears. Um, so the genius behind all of this is undoubtedly Ashiro Honda-san. While he might not be globally, I guess, recognized as other directors in the film world at that time. But within Japan and for like genre film enthusiasts, and just the Godzilla franchise itself, he is a titan. He is literally seen as a god in filmmaking to some people in Japan. Um, and he's known for his kind of humanistic approach to sci-fi and fantasy, and kind of often exploring all those different technological advancements and stuff and these like kind of threats on human society and just individual lives. Hey Greg, what's going on, man? Glad to have you here. Talking about some Godzilla movies tonight. The first five Godzilla movies to be exact tonight. So glad to have you here, man. But anyway, prior to making Godzilla, um, Ishiro Honda he worked extensively, I guess, with the legendary director Akira Kurosawa as like an assistant director, I think he was. Notably on like stuff like Stray Dog, I think it's called, which I've still not seen, but I really I'm interested in watching that. I'm because rewatching all these Godzilla films this week has really got me like back into that Japanese culture and just the Japanese filmmaking, and it's really it's kind of giving me that itch again that I gotta so I gotta watch some more of these Japanese films. Godzilla really reignited that fire in me. Um, but this whole experience that that he had working with Akira Kurosawa, undoubtedly I think shaped his filmmaking like sensibilities. Just kind of uh, with this, I guess, like a strong sense of just visual storytelling and character development, and just yeah, I mean, so you could tell that there was a huge impact on him as he was going into making these films, and we'll talk more about that as well later because this is not the only film that Honda-san has done in the Godzilla franchise. Um, you guys are probably going to get sick of hearing about him by the time this is all over with. But anyway, Honda's direction, in Godzilla, I think, is crucial for its, very enduring power, and he doesn't just focus on the spectacle of the monster. He crafts that kind of human drama, surrounding it as well, and he gives a lot of weight to these characters and just to their fears, to their moral dilemmas, and just their resilience as well. I mean, the movie is much about the human response to these like unimaginable catastrophes as it is about the monster itself. Um, and he just, he infuses that kind of somber, almost documentary like tone into the film. Um, especially in the scenes that are depicted of the aftermath of Godzilla's attacks, just kind of capturing that realistic, horror and that devastation. And this, there's a grounded approach here as well. It's combined with all these kind of fantastical elements, and it's really what makes Godzilla so profoundly effective, in my opinion. Um, and Honda's vision elevated what could have been a simple monster movie into this really powerful, cinematic statement. If you hear my dogs barking, sorry guys, I think my brother-in-law's outside. So, but anyway, so now like I got a little sidetracked there, but now I'm going to get into the story, guys. So the story of the 1954 Godzilla is just a masterpiece in building suspense, portraying that human drama, just delivering a powerful message, And so let's go ahead and just break this story down. So it begins subtly with this mysterious destruction of these ships near Odo Island, and just that there's this feeling and this fear of just the unknown are kind of expertly built here in this opening scene. And just the escalating incidents from like the Akomaru and the Bingomaru to the fishing boat, um, just all they all build this tension and hint at something that's really far more significant than just a natural disaster. And these, like I said, these elders in the village of Odo Island, and they keep talking about these stories, this legend of a Godzilla that immediately injects this kind of sense of ancient, almost mythical dread, and it just kind of grounds that whole element in the whole local folklore thing. And hey, Daniel, what's going on, man? Glad to have you here, man. Mecha Kong. Well, we're not talking about Mecha Kong tonight, man. We aren't going to get that far into the Godzilla franchise with that, but maybe eventually. Um, but back to what I was saying. So the arrival of like all these reporters brings this kind of modern investigative perspective to the story, while also setting up this kind of interaction between the local community and the outside world. Um, so the storm and the kind of subsequent glimpse of Godzilla's devastation on Odo Island kind of serves as this, I guess, this first terrifying confirmation of the villagers' fears. Um, and there's the destruction of the homes, the people losing their lives, just and these kind of livestock deaths. Really paint this really grim picture of Godzilla's power. Um, so the villagers here, their journey to Tokyo to kind of seek disaster relief highlights this helplessness of just ordinary people, in the face of such like immense destruction. Um, their descriptions and the reporters like evidence kind of point to this something beyond human comprehension. You know what I mean? Um, just leading to the government's involvement and just this this paleontologist coming forward named Dr. Yaman. I forget how they say his name, but this doctor, his character is very pivotal to the story. So he kind of represents the scientific approach to understanding the unknown, just and the discovery of the giant radioactive footprints. Kind of provides this evidence that connects Godzilla to this prehistoric past, and just then this new threat of radiation as well. So the Doctor Yamane, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I'm butchering that, guys. Um, but I always forget how to pronounce his name, even though I just watched the film earlier this week. But his kind of scientific assessment, concludes that Godzilla is this 160 feet tall ancient sea creature who has been mutated by the hydrogen bomb testing, and just he provides a very rational explanation for this monstrous phenomenon. One that's kind of rooted in the anxieties of the atomic age. Um, so the government's debate about kind of notifying the public, it reflects that kind of real world dilemma of just balancing public safety with potential panic. Um, and meanwhile, the continuous loss of all these ships at sea, emphasizes the escalating like threat and Godzilla's reach, and the military intervention with depth with these like depth charges highlights the initial kind of attempts to combat Godzilla with conventional weapons, and the Doctor's disappointment underscores his kind of scientific curiosity and that desire to study Godzilla rather than just simply destroy him. Um, and his declaration that Godzilla is unkillable by conventional means, at least, raises the stakes and reinforces Godzilla's almost kind of supernatural resilience. Um, and then there's this human subplot in the film with Emiko, Ogata, and Sarazawa. And these three characters kind of add a layer of emotional complexity to the story. Amiko, who's breaking off her arranged engagement for love, grounds this kind of fantastical story in relatable human drama. And Sarazawa, who is the Doctor's colleague, is introduced as this kind of mysterious, reclusive figure, which really foreshadows his role in the end. Um, and Sarazawa has this creation that he's made called the Oxygen Destroyer, and this whole demonstration of the Oxygen Destroyer is really a turning point in the film. So Amiko's kind of horror and her like immediate secrecy reveal that this terrifying potential of this weapon, and it sets up this whole moral dilemma, at the heart of the film. Um, and Godzilla's attack on Shinagawa and the train that when he attacks that, I think it really showcases that destructive power that the creature has in this kind of urban setting. Um, and it just kind of it escalates that terror and makes that threat kind of immediate and and personal to the audience in Tokyo because of just their real life experiences with the all the atomic bomb testing and all that. Um, so the government in this, they go through these desperate measures, just with the electrified fence and then deploying out the military. It it proves kind of laughably inadequate against Godzilla's might. I think just the failure of these attempts emphasizes the uh, that kind of futility of force against the force of nature. You know what I mean? And the doctors kind of return home dispirited by this kind of lack of scientific inquiry. It really sets up for the final acts kind of focus on desperation and these kind of crazy solutions to the problem. Um, and the devastation, Tokyo here after Godzilla goes through this rampage is just kind of portrayed with this very stark realism. It focuses on like these costs that these humans have to go through, like these overflowing hospitals and just radiation sickness and just all kinds of you know this despair in all these humans, and it's not just a really a monster movie spectacle. It's a really a depiction of just this urban catastrophe. That echoes that real life destruction of these Japanese cities in World War II. Um, so Amiko's confession about the oxygen destroyer to Ogata, which is driven by this desperation and guilt, and they want all of this destruction and all this death and despair. All that they want this to end. So when she reveals, that she confesses to Ogata about Serizawa's creation, it really sets in motion the film's ending. So Serizawa initially goes through this refusal of, citing all the terrifying, implications of his weapon becoming a super weapon. And it just really raises this kind of profound, ethical question about, scientific responsibility and just the dangers of just, that unchecked technological advancement. Um, and Greg, you said that Godzilla makes you think of Blue Skull. Yeah, man. Well, that's what the songs. That's why they wrote the song. Is because is because of Godzilla. Um, but anyway, back to what I was saying about the story. So Serizawa has this change of heart, and he's kind of triggered by witnessing this nation, undergoing this huge tragedy, and I think it highlights, that power of just of empathy and just this kind of moral responsibility. And he burns all of his like notes and to show that he's committed to sacrificing his creation and himself to really prevent this kind of future misuse of his creation. And Amiko's tears when she sees that he's committed to doing this, it really kind of captures this emotional weight of this decision, and because it's a mixture of both sorrow and hope. Um, so in the final act of the film, with Ogata and Serizawa, suiting up to go underwater to deploy this oxygen destroyer, this super weapon of Serizawa's, it is kind of filled with this tension and just sacrifice, more than anything, and Serizawa's self-sacrifice to ensure that the oxygen destroyer's secret dies with him is really a very moving and powerful act of heroism, I think, in this film. And I believe it elevates him, beyond this scientist and to more of a figure that's willing to, to just bear that burden of I guess like a dangerous discovery for the greater good. Um, And Godzilla goes through this agonizing death, from the oxygen destroyer, dissolving basically into nothingness. And it's a very surprisingly, it's a very surprising moment in the film, because even after the monster is defeated, there's this kind of sense of loss, and just the acknowledgement of the tragedy in his existence. Um, So the doctor hears final somber warning at the end of the film that another Godzilla may rise if this nuclear testing continues, is, I think the film's lasting message with everyone. It's not this triumphant ending where, the day is saved, or anything, but it's more of a cautionary one. And it reminds the audience that that this underlying threat, this destructive potential of like nuclear weapons, and and human pride still remains, unfortunately. Um, so that's Godzilla from 1954, and to me, it's definitely one of the most impactful of the entire franchise. And the 1954 Godzilla, I think, is really a landmark of cinema. And I think it's deeply resonant, and and culturally significant work that kind of tackles profound themes of just nuclear anxiety and just post-war trauma, and just the power of nature, and just kind of that ethical responsibility, of science. And the Shiro Honda, who directed this, he did it masterfully. It just kind of, he coupled that with this compelling story, and this iconic monster. And I think it has just really cemented its place, as a cinematic masterpiece. I mean, um, for anyone who wants to understand the whole enduring appeal of Godzilla, that doesn't, and because I I'm passionate about this because I'm a huge Godzilla fan, and I have been for over 30 years. Um, but for anyone that's kind of new to Godzilla, new to the franchise, and you just kind of want to understand that whole appeal, and just that kind of that power of that type of genre filmmaking, this film is not just recommended. I mean, I think it is absolutely essential to view. It should be one of those movies that you should definitely watch. If you have a list of movies you want to watch before you die, this is definitely one of them. And and I think the film remains, for me as a huge fan, and countless others who are fans of the franchise, that this is quite possibly Godzilla, the greatest Godzilla film that's ever been made. Um, as far as the undertones and everything going for that underlying message. Um, Now, is it my favorite? No, not exactly. It's one of my favorites, but I will definitely get around to talking about what is my favorite later this weekend. When we went, because like I said, I'm going to be covering all 15 films from the Showa era. Just the first five tonight. Um, so yeah, so I guess let's go ahead, and if nobody has any questions, nobody's talking anything in the chat. I guess I'll go ahead and just move on and just kind of speed through this as fast as I can, guys. Because this is going to be a long weekend. If you're a Godzilla fan, you like hearing it. So this is going to be a long one, guys. So the next film in the franchise, which is the direct sequel to the original Godzilla, and this took place a year later in 1955. This is Godzilla Raids Again. And so, what exactly is Godzilla Raids Again? Well, again, for those that are kind of less initiated into this kind of world of kaiju and the Godzilla franchise, um, like I said, it's a direct sequel to the 1954 original Godzilla. And just a year after the world was introduced to this kind of devastating power of Godzilla, Toho, who distributes these films, blessed us with another Godzilla film, and the follow up to the original. And I think it's a fantastic bridge between the whole somber cautionary tale of the first film into the more action packed, monster extravaganzas that would follow, and what a lot of Godzilla fans have come to know and love. Um, and this movie was directed by Motoyoshi Oda, uh, and he might not be as widely recognized in the whole kaiju genre as much as Ishiro Honda is. Um, but he was definitely a seasoned director who was known for his work in like comedy and musicals and dramas. And you know, while a lot of his background might seem kind of unexpected for a monster movie, um, it actually brings a very unique energy to this movie, Godzilla Raids Again. There's this kind of certain, almost like playful pacing in the scenes with all the human characters, which kind of is a contrast to all the like the earth shattering weight of the monster action. So while Honda's original was, kind of steeped in that post-war anxiety and it's more a serious approach, Oda's approach in Raids Again feels kind of slightly more, lighthearted, I guess, and it focuses more on that kind of immediate threat and just that aspect of just the monster versus monster. So this is the first film where Godzilla actually fights another monster, and so let's go ahead and just dive into the story of this movie. So we are thrown right back into this world, and it's clear that the terror of Godzilla is still kind of fresh in everybody's minds. Um, so we end up meeting this guy named Shoichi and this other guy named Koji, and there are these two pilots who are working for Kaio Fishing Inc. Incorporated, um, and you know these aren't just scientists or these or military officials, but they're just everyday guys. Just they're just trying to earn a living, and just this whole grounded perspective is really immediately engaging. I think, and uh, Kobayashi, this other guy, is in a stroke of like bad luck. Experiences kind of engine trouble and lands on this remote island, and so his buddy that's with him, like ends up, um, which is what's his name, Shoichi, ends up, going to rescue him. So so what do they end up finding? So they're not these stranded seagulls or any kind of deserted beaches, but they end up finding these two colossal dinosaur type creatures, you know, fighting it out. And yeah, you guessed it. Godzilla's back, and he's brought a friend. Well, not really a friend, but rather this enemy that he's fighting. And this is where Godzilla Raids Again, I think, truly shines because it introduces to Anguirus, who is this kind of spiky, ankylio- ankylosaurus like monster, and he's the very first monster that we see Godzilla battle in the whole franchise. So this was definitely groundbreaking, for the Godzilla franchise. And just forget about just one giant monster, stomping around destroying cities. So now we have two of these things, running around, and it's pure awesomeness, if you ask me. Just this kind of initial encounter on that island is very brief. But it's very impactful as well. It kind of leaves both of these pilots, terrified and just, you know, very like, not understanding of what's going on in this whole situation. So they end up returning to Osaka, and they report this sighting of these two big creatures, and that brings them into contact with Dr. Yamane from the first film. And this connection to the first film is very brilliantly handled, and because it provides this kind of sense of continuity and just this weight to the situation. So the Doctor, played once again by Takashi Shimura, it serves as our kind of exposition guide, reminding us of that oxygen destroyer and just that kind of unfortunate unavailability now that's been destroyed. It kind of sets the stage for that desperate attempt to combat Godzilla, and his suggestion to use like blackouts and flares, due to Godzilla's kind of light sensitivity, I think is a very clever nod to the original film, and it really shows this kind of developing understanding of this creature. Um, so shortly after this, we're then introduced to Hidemi, who is the one pilot's girlfriend, and she's the daughter of Yamaji, who is this boss at the fishing company where these pilots work. So this kind of human element, was classic for these films. Um, I think it really adds like a personal stake to this kind of unfolding crisis that's at hand, and Hidemi's worry highlights this impact of like Godzilla's potential rampage on these kind of ordinary citizens and businesses, and um, her concern also about this company's valuable like fishing grounds adds another layer of realism, and stakes. And it's not just about city destruction, but also about like these livelihoods and this like economic impact of Godzilla's wrath. Um, so the tension builds, and as Godzilla heads towards Osaka Bay, and the authorities attempt to lure Godzilla away from like flares and the citywide blackout, and this chaos just truly erupts at this point, and it's a very like fantastic subplot, I think, that really adds to that mayhem and just that slightly absurd fun of these films. Um, just this or this like a group of these escaped convicts inadvertently draws Godzilla back to Osaka with this massive oil refinery explosion, and this element, while seemingly a bit much, I think it actually underscores like the that unpredictable nature of just disaster, and how even humans can contribute to this to the kaiju's rampage. I think it's definitely a classic B movie trope, if you will, that was executed with this, perfectly. Um, Daniel, you said my buddy just told me about a place he found Betsy Lane, East City Cars Collectible, bro. We're going to yeah. The guy we went to school with, high school with, Keith Duncan, actually runs that store. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I've been meaning to go and check it out at some point. Yeah, we should for sure. Um, but back to the story. So this monster battle suddenly starts happening in Osaka, and Godzilla and Anguirus, they clash in this like I guess like a city destroying brawl that's very very pure unadulterated kaiju mayhem. Um, so the destruction is kind of ramped up, at this point, compared to the first film, and because you see two of these titans now kind of smash through buildings, and they're wrestling around and they roar at each other, and it's just it's very exciting, and I think it's very awesome to me. I love that shit. So Yamaji's kind of cannery gets ends up getting obliterated, and even the escaped convicts, the convicts, they end up becoming these kind of casualties of these two monsters battling one another. It's a bit of dark humor, I guess, amidst kind of destruction, but you but the fight ends up culminating in this whole brutal finish as Godzilla, he ends up defeating Anguirus, and he incinerates him pretty much with his atomic breath, and I think that this scene really establishes Godzilla's dominance and sets the stage for the film's climax, or the ending. Um, but the aftermath of all this, sees that the fishing company relocates to Hokkaido, and then we're introduced to this guy named Tajima, who is one of the pilots, like old war buddies, and he kind of adds another human connection to the story. Um, and meanwhile, this whole subtle romantic tension is hinted at with Kobayashi and Hidemi, and this kind of this really classic romance subplot often found in these films, I guess. It just really adds, a touch of heart to the whole monster mayhem that's, mostly well known with these films. But of course, Godzilla, after the battle he went through with Anguirus and all that, he's not done yet. So news starts to arrive of this other ship, the ship that is sunk. And so the hunt is back on now for Godzilla. And this leads us to this kind of snowy landscape of Hokkaido and just this showdown between the humans and Godzilla on Kamiko Island. So Kobayashi emerges as a true hero here by sacrificing himself in this kind of attempt to stop Godzilla by crashing his plane and triggering this initial avalanche. Um, and so this whole selfless act that he does, it costs him his life, tragically, but it becomes that key to the humans' strategy to survive. Um, and they're all driven by this desire to avenge their friend. Um, so one of the pilots, he convinces Tajima to take him along, kind of highlighting this bond between these guys and this just the human cost of like fighting these monsters. Um, so the ending of this is fantastic. I love it. So the Japanese defense force here, they create this kind of this barrier of fire basically, and it's very visually striking. It's one of my favorite parts in the entire movie. So while these pilots and the military kind of trigger these massive avalanches, it buries Godzilla under tons of snow and ice. I think this was a brilliant and unique way to really defeat Godzilla. It's because it's not fancy technology, but it's just they're just really utilizing their environment against the monster, and just one of the pilot's final words, acknowledging Kobayashi's sacrifice, as Godzilla is buried, is just really genuinely moving, I think, amidst that whole, monster mayhem that's created in the film. Um, but Godzilla Raids Again, I think is another absolute gem in the franchise. Definitely was very successful. And was just a very innovative chapter in the Godzilla franchise as it introduced that thing we all know and love with these huge kaiju battles, um, and it's not a rehash of the first film or anything. It expands the universe, and it introduces us to this new monster and Anguirus, and it just ramps up all that monster action that we loved from the first film, and it made us love it even more with the second film. Um, and while it may not be as deeply philosophical as the original, but I think it definitely delivers on on just that pure monster entertainment with a solid like human story kind of woven in there as well. Um, and the director here, Motoyoshi Oda, he really crafts this movie into this action-packed sequel. That really lays that groundwork for the whole monster versus monster formula that would become a staple, of the Godzilla franchise. So if you love Godzilla, I think that you definitely want to see this movie. This is definitely an important Godzilla film in the franchise. I mean, because if you want to see the King of the Monsters face his very first on-screen rival, then Godzilla Raids Again is definitely an absolute must-watch. Just highly, highly recommended for every Godzilla fan out there. Um, so Daniel, you said you love how they make Godzilla's roar. His roar was made for the sound. Yeah, I remember reading about that a long time ago, but I had kind of forgot about it until you mentioned that. Um, That is really interesting, man. Like it's interesting to me in general, like of how like these affects people in films, just what they do to try to make these sound effects, or what all the stuff they use to make like the practical effects, like makeup effects, just different things. That shit's so interesting to me. I love reading about that stuff. Um, but I guess I'll go ahead and move on now to the third film in the franchise, guys. And this one is one that kind of um, sparked interest in when they were doing this new series of Godzilla films, that the American films of the Godzilla films that are out, that have been coming out here recently. As this one brings Godzilla and King Kong together. This is King Kong versus Godzilla from 1962. And where do I begin with this one? So, like again, like I said, as a lifelong fan of Godzilla, I absolutely love this movie, and I think this might have been one of the very first Godzilla films that I ever watched when I was a kid. Um, and This movie is so crazy, man. Like it's kind of this monumental clash of these titans, and it's a dream match, between these two characters, and just a really just a movie that has kind of cemented itself in you know I guess like kaiju movie history. So um and with this film, you can kind of forget like nuanced character studies or philosophical stuff that was very present with the first film. um this one is just pure monster mayhem fun. Like I absolutely love this one. I think this movie is amazing. Um, so from the moment these kind of the icy depths release Godzilla, and you know that you're in for this kind of wild city smashing ride if you're already familiar with the first two films. And this kind of masterpiece of of Monster Mash was was brought to life by the original director of the 1954 Godzilla, Ashiro Honda. So he is back now with King Kong versus Godzilla, and like I said, this guy is a legend. I absolutely love Ashiro Honda. Um, like I said, he brought us the groundbreaking original film, and he wasn't just about these giant monsters battling. He really understood the kind of underlying anxieties and that social commentary that these creatures could embody. Um, um, and beyond Godzilla, he directed a whole host of these other films, like the Mothra solo film, Rodan, and War of the Gargantuas. And although Mothra and Rodan are characters in the Godzilla franchise, I was only going to focus on just the films in the franchise that feature Godzilla. So I will do reviews at another time of the Mothra film and the Rodan film, because those are both just as good as the original Godzilla in my opinion. The original Mothra film is definitely probably one of the best kaiju films of all time. Um, but by him also working on those films, I think that really solidified him as this kind of his status as a true giant in this genre. Um, so knowing that Ashiro Honda was the director of King Kong versus Godzilla, I think that just adds another layer, of appreciation for these films, and this one in particular, because you're in these very skilled hands of, you know, because of what he did with the original film in 1954. Like as good as that movie was, this one's going, and with this adding that extra dose of another monster, and they clashing with one another. I mean, you know that you're in for a treat. So let's go ahead and jump into the story of this. And it's, I mean, and the story is wacky, it's wild, it's wonderful, you know. And we kick things off with this very hilarious character named Mr. Taco, who is this like head honcho character at this place called Pacific Pharmaceuticals. And this guy is just probably my favorite character in this whole movie. Honestly, he's so over the top. You know, he's desperate for these ratings, and just kind of convinced that a giant monster is the answer. So this whole desperation leads him to Faroe Island, which is this kind of mysterious um, local island that is rumored to kind of house this colossal beast, much like Godzilla. So Taco he dispatches these kind of very reluctant two guys out to investigate and try to see if they could get something going by going to this island. And these guys' names are Sakurai and Faru. And so they're sent to this island to try to see if they can get you know this this beast that they've been hearing about, which is Kong, so they can involve him in this this have one side for this kind of epic showdown with Godzilla. And just meanwhile, while this is happening, they're in this other kind of location. So, in a very huge stroke of coincidence, this American submarine called the Seahawk uh, unfortunately bumps into this iceberg, and that iceberg happens to have Godzilla inside of it, and he's been slumbering there since 1955. Because like I said, so it's been 7 years since we got a Godzilla film. So we're going to automatically assume that Godzilla has been inside this iceberg for 7 years. So yeah, they bump into that iceberg, and Godzilla, this just he bursts forth from this kind of icy prison, and immediately, just establishes dominance by obliterating the Seahawk submarine. Um, and from there, this kind of classic Godzilla rampage across Japan, smashing military bases and just letting everyone know who's boss here. It's this tension kind of builds perfectly as we wait for this inevitable collision between Godzilla and King Kong. So over back on Faroe Island, we get our first glimpse of King Kong, and what a hell of an entrance it is. Um, so this massive octopus ends up showing up on the island, and it's a seriously like very impressive practical effect um, with this octopus, and so invades this kind of this local village there on the island, and it's trying to get this it's this red, I forget what they call it. It's like this red juice that they make on the island, and so it's kind of like derived from these like special red berries, which is apparently King Kong's weakness in this film, or maybe it's his strength enhancer. I don't know, but anyway, enter King Kong now. So he kind of merges. He merges in this kind of really awesome, like entrance into the film, and just he engages into this really awesome brawl with the octopus, and Kong just absolutely dominates this fight, and it just kind of proves that he is also this monstrous titan, much like how Godzilla is. So just in again foreshadowing this inevitable of like that's what everybody's waiting for, is that fight between Kong and Godzilla. So King Kong then indulges in this red berry juice, as these villagers kind of perform this ceremony, and it ends up like kind of hypnotizing Kong, and it knocks him out, and he goes for this huge nap. So this whole Faroe Island section is fantastic, I think, because it establishes Kong as this very powerful force, in his own right, very distinct from Godzilla. Um, and here comes the crazy part of this whole plan. Um, so Mr. Taco, who bless his heart, he decides to capture Kong for publicity, and he think he to him he this is a fantastic idea. So uh, his two little henchmen, or whatever you want to call them, Sakurai and Faru, they somehow succeed in strapping this truly massive Kong onto this raft. Just let that visual kind of sink in. Um, so I mean, these two little guys somehow strap this huge monster, King Kong, onto this raft. But anyway, so they start hauling him back to Japan. And of course, again, the Japanese like self defense force, or I think that's what their name is. It's like the or Japanese Defense Force or something like that. They aren't thrilled about this like giant ape heading towards their homeland. So, and they attempt to try to intercept it, but guess who else is heading to Japan? That's right, my man Godzilla. He's so another like it's all pure coincidence, folks. So this kind of inevitable monster uh, meet between Kong and Godzilla um, is is something else for sure. So this is the first time that they're going to be fighting. They fight a couple different times, but this first fight is less more of a full blown battle. Is but it's more of a like a sizing up session between the two, and so Kong he starts chucking these like massive rocks at Godzilla, and it's wonderfully silly looking, and I love it. It's perfect. But however, Godzilla, who's the king of the monsters, he just shrugs off these puny rocks, and he unleashes this kind of this his atomic breath. So Kong, just kind of realizing that he's outmatched for now, he ends up retreating. And just it's really just it's funny to me because I've known in my head what the visuals look like in that scene, and if you guys have not seen it, then you have to watch it. It's got to be seen to believe. Um, but yeah, that whole first encounter just I think really sets the stage perfectly for what will be the main event in this movie. So the Japanese Defense Force, and they're trying everything in their arsenal, to stop Godzilla, and they try pits and explosives and poison gas, but none of it's working. But they do have some success with this kind of this electric barrier that shoots out these like a million volts or whatever. Um, and then this in another twist of fate, Kong arrives in Tokyo, kind of drawn to the electricity like a moth would to a flame. Um, and he tears through these power lines, seemingly kind of charging himself up with all this electricity, and it's another sight to behold because it's that pure like monster movie magic, and that true Kong fashion, he grabs Famiko much like he did Fei Ray in the original King Kong, and Famiko is Sakurai's sister, because we gotta have a damsel in distress here, and then he makes his iconic climb up the National Diet Building, which is really a fantastic Japanese twist on the Empire State Building scene in the original King Kong. But again, like I said, the Japanese Defense Force and this kind of surprisingly clever thinking, they end up deploying out all that red berry juice that's been vaporized at this point, just to knock Kong out and to rescue Famiko. But their master plan in all this is to airlift the sleeping Kong to Godzilla, hoping they'll just eliminate each other. Um, and I think this is very like top tier, like monster movie logic, and, and I love it. I just absolutely love it, guys. Just it's so comical to me, and I think that's part of the charm of these movies. Um, but finally, this battle, we've always been waiting for now. So the next morning, atop Mount Fuji, um, which is, kind of an iconic location in general, um, Kong is dropped off to face Godzilla. And the fight here between them is just this very chaotic rubber suit brawl. Like it's crazy. I mean, I get so excited talking about these movies because like they're so amazing to me, and just like they were just a huge part of my childhood, especially this one. Like I said, this was one of the first ones I remember watching as a kid. Um, but Godzilla, initially, he has the upper hand in this fight, and he just showed off really surprisingly like agile moves. And this is the film where they kind of like all the to show how like athletic these monsters are, because and it even gets even more ridiculous with each film, but I think again that's a part of the charm of these films. But like I said, Godzilla, he has these kind of very surprising like agile moves, and he even does a drop kick. And and I think that's another reason why uh there's such a huge appeal to me of these movies, is because where I'm a huge wrestling fan, it's like you're watching wrestling, but with huge giant monsters. Um, and that's my kind of entertainment, guys. Um, but Godzilla in all of this, he's very relentless. He's tail whipping Kong. He's even trying to burn him alive with his atomic breath. Um, but just when things start to look kind of bad for King Kong, this bolt of lightning ends up striking Kong, and it's this kind of just it it rejuvenates him basically, and just kind of empowers him more, and gives him that second wind. And now Kong being all charged up, literally, um, Kong is now back in the fight against Godzilla. So this whole final act of this destructive rampage down Mount Fuji and into Atami, we get these monsters, smashing through Atami Castle, which is a very spectacular visual in itself. As they're trading blows back and forth, and then this whole grand finale where these titans kind of tumble off a cliff into Sagami Bay. Um, this kind of brief underwater um, wrestling match kind of ensues, and then Kong is the only one that resurfaces at the end, and he swims, back towards Faroe Island, and Godzilla is nowhere to be seen here. And it leaves us, the audience, it leaves the Japanese Defense Force, everybody to kind of speculate on Godzilla's survival. And of course, we know he survived. He's Godzilla. Uh, but King Kong versus Godzilla isn't just a fun monster movie. I think it's really a testament to that enduring appeal of these giant creatures. It's a film that really understands exactly what fans want. Massive monsters, uh, city leveling destruction, and just this kind of thrilling, over the top story. And while some might find the campiness and just the rubber suits and a bit dated. I mean, this was 1962, guys. I mean, this was pretty fucking good for 1962. Um, and for a Godzilla fan like myself, it's just pure nostalgia and joy. It's really it's a celebration of the king of the monsters, and the King of Kong, and even when he shares that spotlight, with another, formidable like monster, it just shows that this film is a must watch for any kaiju enthusiast, and just it's a perfect example of why Godzilla continues to reign supreme as the undisputed king, even though he lost in this. Uh, I mean, whose franchise is longer, Godzilla or King Kong's? So long live Godzilla. And with that, let's see what's going on in chat. So, Daniel, you said, damn it, Tennessee beat Kentucky. Well, son of a bitch. That's not the news I needed to hear while doing my Godzilla stream. But it is what it is. Calipari, I think, got beat today, too. Arkansas. I think it was today. Or was that today? Yeah. So, anyway, that sucks that Kentucky's out. And you said, oh shit, you said Kaiju made me think of a name I've not heard in a long time. Ultraman. Yeah. I talked about Ultraman at the beginning of this stream, because I was talking about how that was like one of the things that kind of came out of the creation of Godzilla, because Godzilla influenced stuff like Ultraman and Kamen Rider and Power Rangers, which before it was Power Rangers, it was Super Sentai in Japan. And but I didn't learn all that till I was much older. And that like blew my mind when I found out that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in the U.S. was just a lot of the footage in the show was used from Super Sentai in Japan from the 80s. So yeah, it's a lot of interesting things that goes into this whole genre of kaiju stuff. Yeah, I absolutely love it, man. It's been such a huge interest for me for so long. But I guess now, moving on to the next film in this franchise, is, well, I talked about her a little bit earlier, as she had her own solo film that I will eventually get around to doing a review of on this channel. But her introduction to this channel is going to be within this movie from 1964, where she takes on my man Godzilla, and this is Mothra versus Godzilla. So this is another true gem in the Godzilla franchise, and definitely another one of my top favorites. Probably in my top five for sure. This one. And I think this is another is very essential viewing for anyone who loves giant monsters, stomping cities and wrestling around, um, and this movie is, if you haven't seen it, you need to stop watching this video right now and go watch Mothra versus Godzilla. Seriously, like it's that good. So again, if for those that are not familiar with the whole classic Toho Monster Mayhem, um, what exactly is Mothra versus Godzilla? So, in a nutshell, it's just pure, again, pure unadulterated kaiju perfection, much like how Godzilla Raids Again was, much how King Kong versus Godzilla was. But out of all the monster battle movies thus far in the franchise, this one has definitely got to be my favorite, thus far. Why is it my favorite one? No, but up to this point in the franchise, it was definitely my favorite. Um, and so it's, like I said, it's the fourth film in the original Godzilla series. It was released in 1964 in Japan, and later it was released in the U.S. It's Godzilla versus the Thing, which is, I think, is a title that we can just kind of politely, ignore. Um, but yeah, this movie is, again, not just a Godzilla movie, but it's also a Mothra movie in its own right too. And when these two titans clash with one another, it is awesome. And again, behind the camera, we got the legendary Ishiro Honda back again. And Honda-san, who's the man who just practically invented the whole kaiju genre. He's once again, in top form here, and he understands this whole delicate balance between spectacle and storytelling, and just between these these monstrous destruction and just the human drama. He doesn't just give us monsters fighting; he gives us a story around the monster fight, and I think that's really what elevates Mothra versus Godzilla from just a monster mash to a very truly memorable film. Um, and this it all starts with this giant mysterious egg. Excuse me. So it starts with this giant mysterious egg that washes ashore after this typhoon near Nagoya. And these two kind of shady businessmen, Kumiyama and Torihata, uh, they all they see is the dollar signs in their eyes immediately. So they buy the egg, and because it was discovered in waters uh, that their company owned or something like that. And so they're envisioning they envision this egg as kind of this major tourist attraction, and these guys are just classic cartoonish, greedy villains, and I think they're perfect for this story. So meanwhile, there's these reporters, Junko and Ichiro, that are investigating the egg, and they're kind of getting suspicious of these businessmen's motives. Um, so they end up traveling to Infant Island, which is the mythical home of Mothra, and it's this place that's kind of been ravaged by atomic testing and stuff in the past. And there they encounter the native island, the islanders there, and also these two little um, twin priestesses, or like fairies, called that they're known as the Shobijin. Um, and they're the ones who they plead with the humans to return the egg back to the island, explain it it belongs to their god Mothra. Um, so of course these greedy businessmen they're deaf to reason here, and they absolutely refuse to agree to this, which is a bad move, guys, because as predicted, this egg ends up hatching, and out pops this Mothra larva creature. Um, and this Mothra larva creature is not the vibrant winged beauty that of Mothra that we know and love yet. Instead, it's this kind of giant, wriggling silkworm, and it's instinctively drawn back to Infant Island. So this larval Mothra, starts its journey, back home, leaving kind of a trail of unintentional destruction, as any giant larva would. But this is where I think the film really beautifully balances the monster action with the human story, because we see this chaos that Mothra is causing, but we also see this kind of genuine concern and empathy from Junko and Ichiro. So they understand that Mothra is not malicious, and she's just trying to get home. Um, and then bam, just when you think that things can't get any crazier, Godzilla emerges, and he is pissed, and so he's awakened by all this construction and this the kind of general human hubbub, I guess, um, and just all his atomic breath, fury, whatever, rises from the earth near Mount Fuji and heads straight for Nagoya. So this Godzilla is mean, and he is classic Showa era Godzilla at his most destructive. He's less a misunderstood creature, and he's more of this kind of force of nature. And he's just a walking, roaring embodiment, of destruction. Um, and he's ready to tear everything down. So now we have a real problem. So human defenses are kind of useless, of course, and the self defense forces are kind of thrown. They throw everything that they have at Godzilla, and but it's like throwing pebbles at a mountain. And the Mothra larva is still trying to make its way back to Infant Island, but Godzilla is kind of on this direct collision course with it as well. Um, so the Shobijin, in this kind of moment of desperation and courage, they travel to Japan to try to plead with these humans for help. And they believe that the adult Mothra, who is currently resting in its cocoon on Infant Island, is the only one who can stop Godzilla. So the humans, they finally realize that the gravity of this situation is real, and this kind of feeling of a pang of guilt for their greed, they agree to help. So the plan is to lure Godzilla to Mothra, and this leads to this epic Mothra versus Godzilla battle. Now, first, the larval Mothra, despite being smaller and younger, just confronts Godzilla near Nagoya, and this whole larva fight is fantastic. So the Mothra larva uses its silk spray to try and ensnare Godzilla, and Godzilla, being Godzilla, just kind of stomps and roars and is wreaking havoc all over the place while this is happening. And so while this larva fight is kind of is very cool, it's clear that the larval Mothra is outmatched, but the adult Mothra arrives, and bursting from its cocoon in this kind of very dazzling display of like her wings and the vibrant colors, and um, just it's very cool, man. I love it. This is where the fight truly begins. Um, this is the iconic clash, I think, that we've all been waiting for. And we get these aerial attacks from Mothra, and just kind of these her signature poisonous scales, and Godzilla, who retaliates with his atomic breath and tail swipes, just brute strength. It's just this battle moves on from land to sea, and it's really the whole scene is very visually stunning and just very exciting. Um, but the ending of this of the fight is genius in my opinion. So the adult Mothra, manages to trap Godzilla in this kind of massive cocoon of silk, and unable to move, Godzilla sinks into the ocean um, near the ruins of Iwa Island. Um, and so Mothra, who's exhausted but victorious, then returns to Infant Island with the Shobijin, and the world is saved. Thanks to Mothra's bravery and somewhat cooperation of humanity. Um, so the greedy businessmen get their comeuppance in all of this, and Junko and Ichiro, who learned a valuable lesson about respect for nature, are heroes in their own right. So this movie is amazing, and it is huge. I mean, it's considered by many fans, myself included, to be one of the absolute best Godzilla films of the Showa era, and just arguably one of the best Godzilla films ever. Again, we have it's not my favorite though. We still haven't got to that one. You guys probably won't find out that till tomorrow on day 2 of Godzilla Fest. But this is definitely one of my favorites, and it just it introduced Mothra to Godzilla's world, and it just solidifies her as this major player in the Godzilla universe. Um, and like I said, while Mothra had her own solo film before, this is the first time that we see her interact directly with Godzilla, and it establishes this whole dynamic that would continue in future films. Um, and Mothra becomes not just a protector of humanity, but this kind of powerful force that's capable of challenging even the king of the monsters. Um, and Mothra versus Godzilla, perfectly blends like that monster action with a very compelling human story. Just the themes of like greed and environmental responsibility, which kind of foreshadows that later eco-conscious Godzilla films that we'll get to. Um, but and just that power of nature are all kind of woven seamlessly into this monster spectacle of a movie. Um, and it's really also about the consequences of just human actions and that need for respect and understanding. Um, the special effects in this, I gotta talk about that. So the special effects in this were supervised by I believe Iji Subaraya, I think is how you say his name. I may be butchering that. Sorry, um, but the effects that he created here are very top notch. I think for the time. I mean, again, this was 1964, um, so I mean, yeah, I mean it's very top notch for that time, and just the suits that are using this is very excellent. The miniature cities that were created to be destroyed is awesome. I love that, and just the monster designs themselves are iconic. Um, you know the all the battle sequences here are just I think beautifully choreographed. And it really makes for some truly memorable like moments in kaiju movie history. Um, just those vibrant colors of Mothra's wings, and especially the adult form, is really a visual treat. For um, against kind of the darker, more imposing Godzilla. Um, And decades later, this movie, I think, like I said, it remains a beloved and influential film. It's often cited as a favorite by Godzilla fans worldwide. Um, and its success really paved the way for many more of those monster team up films in the Showa era and beyond all that. Um, and just that whole dynamic between Godzilla and Mothra is represented here as adversaries, and then later, sometimes they're allies. I think it's just become this kind of a cornerstone, of these Godzilla, uh, mythos, I guess you could call it. But um, in conclusion, Mothra versus Godzilla is fucking amazing. It's a must see. I think again, and you want to be hearing that a lot from me, and I may be biased because I'm a huge Godzilla fan, but all these Godzilla movies are must see, except that Matthew Broderick shit that came out in the 90s. Um, but we don't talk about that. But anyway, like I said, this one is a must see for any self-respecting Godzilla fan. Um, and it's a fantastic entry point for anyone who's curious about the kaiju genre. It's got everything you could want here. These rampaging monsters, just these like, thrilling battles, and just a really compelling story, and just that a little touch of social commentary here and there as well. I mean, it's a film that understands what makes these giant monster movies so popular. Just the sheer spectacle of and these imaginative creatures, and just the stories that they tell it really resonates with people. I think so. Um, Go watch it if you've never seen it. Definitely go watch it. Prepare to be amazed. Is all I can tell you. Again, long live Godzilla, long live Mothra, and long live Mothra versus Godzilla. So now that brings me to the last movie that I'm going to be talking about for tonight. And this one was a game changer, folks, for the franchise. Um, and this is the 1964 classic Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. All right, so let's. This one actually may be my second favorite Godzilla franchise film of all time. And we're going to dive into this because it really this film holds a special place in my heart. But and it also just it reshapes. Like I said, it is great. It's a game changer because it reshapes the whole landscape of these monster movies in the franchise forever. Um, so if you're even kind of remotely interested in giant monsters duking it out, having wrestling around, having these big, huge battles, this and again, folks, I know I keep saying this, but I mean I'm for real with this one. This flick is essential viewing. Trust me, trust me, you are in for a treat with this one. So first things first, what is Ghidorah, the three-headed monster? Simply put, this is the fourth Godzilla film in the. I'm sorry. The fifth Godzilla film in the franchise, and it's arguably the one that really truly elevated the franchise to where in the direction that it was going. Um, it's not just Godzilla fighting another monster. It's a whole monster buffet of kaiju chaos, packed with action and humor, and just the debut of one of, in my opinion, most iconic sci-fi villains in monster movie history. Um, it it really marks that, like I said, a turning point for the franchise because uh, in this film is when a shift from Godzilla being this villain to a more complex and sometimes even heroic figure in the franchise. Um, and yet again, to make things even better here, behind the camera once again of this masterpiece is the legendary Ashiro Honda. And this man who created Godzilla himself, Honda's kind of steady hand of understanding what makes these giant monster films tick is clearly evident. I think he balances that sheer spectacle of monster battles with human drama, and and even sprinkles in some really surprisingly effective humor. And he is the maestro of this monstrous orchestra, which conducts chaos with a very clear vision. I think. Um, so this movie kicks off with this meteor shower, streaking across the sky, and this isn't just any kind of meteor shower though. It's bringing something extraterrestrial to the Earth. So, meanwhile, we're introduced to Princess Selena, who is mysteriously escaping this assassination, after her plane explodes midair. And strangely, she seems to have lost her memory and starts kind of exhibiting this really bizarre prophet-like behavior. She begins with these warnings of warning the people of all these this kind of impending doom. Claiming to be from Venus and speaking about this golden dragon that's coming to Earth. So the authorities are skeptical of what she's talking about, and especially the princess's uncle, who clearly wants her dead. Uh, they just dismiss her as being this delusional person, and on a completely different front, but equally important, we have the emergence once again of Godzilla, and he stomps ashore, wreaking havoc as only he can, and The military are like scrambling to contain him, and as if one giant monster was enough, bam, Rodan, the pterodactyl king of the skies, also shows up and emerging from Mount Osso. So now we've got these two titans, ready to rumble here. And you remember that meteor that I spoke of? Well, it lands in the mountains and starts glowing. All right, and then this kind of truly spectacular, and terrifying scene, it hatches. And emerging from this fiery rock is King Ghidorah himself, the three-headed golden space dragon. And this isn't just any ordinary monster. So Ghidorah is this planetary destroyer, a cosmic terror that has laid waste to civilizations, across the galaxy. And Godzilla is absolutely my number one favorite monster in these. I mean, it's his franchise, folks. I mean, he's the man. Um, but Ghidorah is a very close second, folks. I love Ghidorah. King Ghidorah is so fucking cool. Um, but and his introduction is just pure cinematic magic. And even today, the design and just the sheer menace of Ghidorah is breathtaking once he appears. I mean, I get chills just even thinking about it. But Princess Selena, now calling herself a Martian, um, continues her warnings and starts to become very frantic about Ghidorah and just this impending destruction, I guess. So this journalist named Shindo and also this detective, uh, they're they're tasked with protecting slash investigating the princess, and they become entangled in this kind of escalating, monster mayhem as well. And they slowly start to kind of believe her as all this evidence continues to mount. I'm like, okay, so maybe she wasn't, bullshit. So Godzilla and Rodan, who are both naturally aggressive and territorial, they initially clash with each other, and so think of it as kind of like a monster turf war, and they're duking it out, oblivious to this even bigger threat that is looming you know in another location and on its way, but when Ghidorah descends and unleashes like these gravity beams and these hurricane winds, even these two behemoths, Rodan and Godzilla, realize that they're facing something far beyond what they're normally used to. And I think this is where the film truly shines too. So these humans, in this kind of desperate attempt to understand the princess and what she's saying, and just find a way to stop King Ghidorah, they try to communicate with Mothra's larva, who are currently in Japan, preparing to I guess go into like a hibernation or whatever. But Mothra, as always, is this kind of voice of reason and peace, and she understands the gravity of the situation. And in this very pivotal scene in the movie, she attempts to mediate between Godzilla and Rodan. And yes, that's you heard me right. So she comes between them and actually talks to them through her telepathic abilities. And this is just pure like brilliance from the Showa era. And like I said, Mothra, she basically tells Godzilla and Rodan, "Hey, listen, you assholes, stop fighting with each other, and look at the real problem here. There's a giant fucking space dragon destroying everything." So amazingly and hilariously, it works. So after a little initial stubbornness and grumbling from Godzilla and Rodan, um, they begrudgingly agree to team up to take on King Ghidorah. And what follows here is an epic, just earth shattering 3-on-1 monster battle. Um, so Godzilla, Rodan, and Mothra, the larva version, despite her being small too, surprisingly helpful with what she does. But they all take on King Ghidorah, and the fight is just amazingly choreographed for the film. With each monster kind of playing to their own strengths. Godzilla, his brute force, atomic breath. Rodan with the aerial attacks and wind gusts and all that. And Mothra just using her like kind of silk and agility and all that. Um, and this battle is pretty long. It's a pretty long scene in the movie. And finally, through this kind of combined effort and a bit of luck, they end up managing to drive King Ghidorah back into space. And then Earth is saved, for now at least, thanks to this kind of unlikely alliance of these monsters. Um, and then the Princess Selena, she also regains her memory at the end. The whole assassination plot is foiled, and everyone, both humans and monsters alike, seem to have kind of learned this valuable lesson about cooperation. Um, and this film rules, and because first of all, it's the birth of a legend here. So the movie introduces King Ghidorah, who is he's Godzilla's like ultimate arch nemesis, and he's a recurring villain who has become as iconic and as recognizable, I think, as Godzilla himself. Um, so the design here, and this may be, even though he's my second favorite monster, this may be my favorite monster design. I mean, it's incredible, and it just that whole sheer destructive power that the character has really sets him apart from all the other monsters, and and he has been a mainstay in the franchise ever since. Just I think really proven that kind of instant popularity and impact um, that he had with this movie. Um, so the monster team up formula here with really solidified that concept of of that monster team up. Um, so before this, Godzilla was mostly a solo act or fighting against just one other monster. Um, but this film showcases that excitement, I think, and that dynamic, possibility of these multiple monsters interacting and fighting and even cooperating. Um, and this formula has been used countless times since becoming a staple of not only just the Godzilla franchise, but the whole kaiju film genre in general. Um, and this, like I said earlier, this movie definitely shifted the tone of the franchise. And while we still have these serious moments of destruction and danger, this film embraced a lighter, more comedic tone, compared to the earlier, darker Godzilla films. And with the exception maybe of King Kong versus Godzilla, that was pretty comedic as well. Um, but the monster interactions in this one are are more funny and almost kind of cartoonish at times. It's particularly that whole monster conversation and just between Mothra and Godzilla and Rodan. Um, I think this shift really paved the way um, for the Showa era films and what really brought them into that kind of charm that everyone came to love about these movies. And while they're still destructive forces of nature, the film humanizes Godzilla and Rodan to a degree here, by having Mothra appeal to them and kind of bring them together as a team. It really just kind of suggests this level of intelligence and even this kind of basic sense of responsibility in these monsters. And I know that's strange to think about, but I actually love that aspect of it. And just the popularity of this movie, like I said, this one remains incredibly popular with fans of the franchise. And again, it's another one of those that's often cited as one of the best Showa era Godzilla films, and I think there's good reason for that. It's fun, it's exciting, it's visually impressive for its time, and it's just packed, with tons of memorable moments. Um, it's a film I think that perfectly encapsulates that charm that I keep talking about, and and it's the sheer entertainment value of it of these classic kaiju movies. Um, but I guess in conclusion, Ghidorah the three headed monster is a fantastic Godzilla movie. It's a landmark film in the franchise, and just a pure joy for any kaiju enthusiast. I think it's got everything that a fan could want. Iconic monsters, uh, iconic battles, just a compelling story, and just again, like I keep mentioning it, but it's just that unmistakable Showa era charm. If you haven't seen this, find it, watch it, and prepare to be amazed by this golden dragon and this monster alliance that saves the earth. This one's a definite 5 star from this Godzilla fan. Um, but that is it for day one, guys, of Godzilla Fest. I hope you enjoyed, listening to me talk about these films and see me get overly excited for these films. But like I said, guys, at the top of this show, these movies mean a lot to me, especially my coming of age. Just growing up watching these movies, and then watching other stuff that was inspired by these movies. Just it they've become a huge part of my life ever since I was a kid, and so yeah, I'm glad to share that with you guys. Have you guys here watching along, listening to everything I had to say about these films. But before I go, now I did promise this on a previous stream that I would be showing off some of my Godzilla collection during Godzilla Fest, and I only got a few things for tonight. I got some other things I'm going to show you through the rest of the weekend for day 2 and day 3. But I'm only going to show you a couple things tonight. It's kind of pertaining to these um, films that I talked about tonight. So first thing I have here and is the 1954 Godzilla Funko Pop. And I love this guy. I love these Funko Pops. Usually they're pretty lightweight, but these Godzilla ones, like I've got a few others here as well that I may show those to you guys in the next couple of days. But I just wanted to show this one off in particular tonight because it's from the 1954 original film. And like I said, these are usually lightweight, but these are super heavy. These Godzilla ones are super heavy, and I just love it. It's a cool looking little guy, and but honestly, anything Godzilla, I will definitely collect. Another item I have here from the original 1954 film is this little blind bag keychain that I got. Let me see if I can take that. There we go. Uh, so yeah, you see that's the iconic scene where he attacks the train, and I think this was actually one of the chases in these blind bags. And it was the one that I was wanting the most, so I got it right away when I bought it. So I thought that was really awesome. This next one, I believe this is from the 1954 film as well. The look, but honestly, it could be compared to a lot of his other looks in the films as well. This is just one I've had for a very long time that I picked up from the flea market here in Hazard, and he's just always just sit on my various different shelves I've had throughout the years. He's always kind of been of a mainstay on my shelf. And I think Bandai put these out back in, let me see if he's got, it says 2009. So I know I haven't had it that long. I mean, I maybe got this maybe in the past 10 years or so. But yeah, He's always been a mainstay on my shelves since I got him. Um, and this is the Godzilla from 1954 as well. And this was made by NECA, and these are I think has since been reissued in like the new boxing, like the Ultimate Edition boxing. So these was the first release, and this came out in I don't see a year, but I know I've had this one for probably close to like 15 years or something in the blister packaging. And yeah, like I said, he's made by NECA, and he's a super cool looking figure. I mean, very detailed. And I really I have a few of these in this like blister packaging. And I really miss when they were making the Godzilla figures like this. I wish they would go back to this packaging. To be honest with you, let me lay that back here. So this next thing I want to show you is, I mean, it's not really from any of the films. It's kind of just a collaboration of like a lot of the early Godzilla films into the video game, which was for the original Nintendo, or the NES, if you will. And that's Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. And this game is hard as hell, and I've never been able to beat it. And if you guys want to see what the gameplay is like, I highly recommend checking out the Angry Video Game Nerds review of the game on YouTube. Very funny stuff. I love the Angry Video Game Nerd. He was like Angry Video Game Nerd was one of the people that initially got me into YouTube years ago. So yeah, he does a whole Godzilla. He's a big Godzilla fan too. I think he does a whole like series of videos on Godzilla stuff, including the video game. He talks about the movies and stuff as well. So um, the next thing I wanted to show you guys was I have some Godzilla plushes here. I have just the regular Godzilla plush, and I have this one. I've not had this one too long, but this is the Cup of Godzilla. Well, let me see if I can like. Can you guys see that? Sorry for the light. Let me see if I can turn this light. So there we go. So he's holding a little cup of noodles, and I thought that was really cute. Um, but I love, like I said, I'll buy about anything of Godzilla if I can find it and I can afford it. Um, but not only do I have these two plushes with me, because I watched King Kong versus Godzilla, I also wanted to show this King Kong. He's even got a little crown. Isn't that cool? This little King Kong plushie that I've had, for the past few years, and I think he kind of pairs well with this Godzilla plushie that I have. So they can kind of battle it out when they want to. Uh, but yeah, guys, I just wanted to show you just a few things for tonight. And again, I just appreciate you guys tuning in and watching along with me, talking with me in the chat. My buddy Daniel here as always. Greg was here earlier. Just and anybody that's not in the chat that's just watching along, and just want to appreciate you guys just as much, and just thank you for tuning in. Um, but I guess that's it for tonight, guys. I really enjoyed doing this video, and I hope you guys did as well. I'll be again on here again tomorrow night for day 2 of Godzilla Fest, where I'll be talking about 5 more Godzilla films. Um, and again, like I said, I know I've said this already, but I just want to thank everyone who watched this live and is in the chat. Everybody that's watching this on replay, thank you as well. Please drop me a comment below on what your favorite from these 5 Godzilla movies are, or who your favorite monster is that I've talked about tonight. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And to catch more videos from me like this one, and including tomorrow night, day 2 of Godzilla Fest, and then on Sunday, day 3 of Godzilla Fest. So please just go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. to watch for more videos when I put them out. And click that bell for any future notifications. But with all that said, um, I'm Crater. This is CraterMania, and it's also Godzilla Fest. I love you guys, and have a good night.